Hi, welcome to week 3 of our augmented reality class. This is a Bennett Costora group. I'm Reginald Bennett
Josh Costera.
here at the University of Maine in Orono. This is 20 June, summer 2014. Doing our class on augmented reality, SIE 598 for this particular semester. And we're going to continue with our initial setup. That's kind of part 2 here. So this week we looked up some resources. We were silly enough initially not to look up Vuzix Corporation. We were just using keywords like RAP 920AR, like the actual name of the product, which hardly brought up anything. But we found a little bit more when we looked up Vuzix Corporation, Vuzix itself, which then brought up a lot of demos of a lot of other AR products, and then Max Reality, which didn't bring up too much different than the first two. But the nice thing that we found out of the Vuzix Corporation thing is we found some tutorials that suppose that their software is working. So once it's working, those demos will actually be pretty cool. They talk about how to use Max Reality inside 3ds and how to install, but it doesn't really work exactly as they show. We'll get to that a little later. And then next is we found they have a Vuzix Facebook page, which they say that they will respond to any questions there. So we did post some questions to them. That was today, and so hopefully when we come back in for our next live meeting next week, we should have some answers.
So this week we started looking into the SDK and developing with actual code. We're using Visual Studio 2013. Most of the projects are older versions of Visual Studio projects, so you have to import them. You also need some libraries. There's the DirectX 9 SDK, OpenCV library, and I believe there's one more. It's like ARL something library. So you have to install those and add those to the include paths, and then your project should build. Ours built pretty easily. But when we run them, they don't work. They have some sort of unhandled exception. So, like Reggie said, I messaged them on their Facebook page and emailed their development portion of the company, asking for some assistance if they could point me in a direction to fix this problem, as well as some other problems that we're having.
So with that being able to get that portion working, we said, hey, why don't we go at this from a different way? The demos you watched the other day were after you install Max Reality, you can click on Max Reality icon. It brings up what looks like an Internet Explorer window, but it's actually the Max Reality application. You can hit F12 to bring up some options in there. But from there you can navigate to any of the AR simulations that you want to run. And so we said, hey, well obviously those are done 3DS, why don't we see what we can do from the 3DS side instead of the programming side. So that's what we tried to do. But after some trial and error, well in the end we didn't get it working, but we'll explain that. So one, we start off 3ds Max 13, nothing was working. We looked around the custom install this time for Max Reality and found that you only get the plugins for 3ds Max if you do a custom install. And we're also enlightened to the fact that it only supports the version 6.1, which is the only one that's available right now, only supports 3ds Max versions 2010, 2011, 2012. And so that was something we went ahead and uninstalled 2013, put in 12. Still running into issues, but just an interesting note, as of right now, today, 20 June 2014, Autodesk is only offering 2012 and up for students. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. Make sure you know which version you have. We would, make sure you read the Max Reality start documentation or quick start documentation. It doesn't mention the custom thing that I saw, but just make sure you're aware of that. So, and then also their installation stuff that we found when we did Vuzix Corporation, we did the install video. They didn't really show that there either. So maybe there's an assumed functionality that's not going on there.
With the Max Reality install, if you don't choose custom, it installs it wherever you want. Even when you choose a custom installation, it still doesn't like some directories. So we tried to install the plugin to the 3ds Max plugin folder, and they would never appear. It would install it to a different directory, wherever it chose. It always shows the same directory, but it would always install it there. We attempted to then copy the plugins from that directory to the correct 3ds Max directory, and it still wouldn't work. When we launched 3ds Max, it said it's an invalid plugin. Basically, I believe it's a 32-bit and a 64-bit comparison problem, because 3ds Max 2012 doesn't give you an option to choose 32 or 64-bit, but I believe the plugin is only a 32-bit. So I think it's trying to use it with a 64-bit since the Windows operating system is 64-bit. So I think that may be the issue we could try and track down next week.
So yeah, even using the install and the videos and stuff we found, Max Reality still isn't we can't edit any of those things and have them actually export to a usable format. So we were able to open up the demos that come with Max Reality in 3ds. We could tweak them a little bit, but because the plugin's not working, we could not export it in a way that it retained those changes. So like a Dragon, we took him and we made him a lot wider, and then it just didn't reflect even though we saved it. So yeah, so hopefully next week we can get some help from Vuzix or figure out exactly what's going on there, maybe try a couple other machines. Mentioning that, so the machine we were using at the beginning of the week ended up like dying this week, and whether it's the goggles or not, I don't know. But I have to replace the motherboard. I'm going to assume it's not. Maybe it has something to do with transporting it back and forth. I don't know. But I know that computer is now gone. So Josh brought in a machine of his.
Yep, I brought in my own personal desktop that I use, and it seems to handle everything. It's got a modern, newer video card and a pretty tough processor, so it handles everything fine so far.
And the good news is this is the third machine that we've, out of 5 machines, this is the third machine we've had so far that it did a direct install and the glasses worked right off.
Yep.
It's not blue screening when we exit. Right. So that's good. So we have another lab machine to work on, and hopefully we can make some headway on either the Visual Studio department, which is I think the hardware specific stuff, or the 3D Max stuff. This week we also, while we're doing our research, we found another plugin for 3ds Max called AR Media. It has very similar functionality. It uses obviously it uses different markers, but they also show where you can put in some custom ones. Now, mentioning custom markers, we saw in a comic book where a guy had put in some renderings without actually using the standard markers. So we're going to assume that Max Reality has the ability to do that as well. It's not anywhere in the documentation I saw so far, but maybe that's something that once we get Max Reality working, or the C++ Visual Studio stuff working, that we can figure that part out. My only concern about using AR Media instead of Max Reality is that since Max Reality is like custom made for the Vuzix stuff, I'm not sure if AR Media is going to utilize the cameras and the 2 screens in the 920 AR correctly. We'll mess around with the custom stuff that Vuzix has a bit next week, and if not, then we'll try this AR Media and see where that goes.
One other demo we saw besides the comic book was a trade show that was actually it was a trade sale where Vuzix actually was there, and they had a demo where they had a legal size piece of paper with a bunch of markers on it that actually you could play a game where you basically rolled like a marble around an obstacle course, and they gave a little bit of insight on how they detect how they determine gravity based off the markers and the positioning of the camera and whatnot, and it kind of gave us a little bit of insight, but as of now it's of no use to us since we can't get it working.
So we believe it's kind of a combination of the measurements taken from the gyros and the estimations on orientation that the software uses when it looks at the markers. We're not sure whether that's something that happens in the 3DS side or the Max Reality side or inside the coding. I'd assume it's probably going to be more the coding. So that's why we need to get those both working so that we can start messing with that. Again, it's unfortunate both systems aren't very intuitive or easy to use out of the box, but hopefully once we get that all working, we'll document that here for anyone else that wants to do that in the future. And so that's what we've been working on and struggling with this week, and hopefully we'll crack at least one of these things open next week, or at least provide you some information on AR Media. And so that's week 3.